Hi, my name is Dave Taylor, I'm from Natural Landscapes and I'm the beekeeper here at Cranfield University. This Velcro tab joined on the front, and when you pull the hood forward, if I can just borrow Becky, when you pull the hood forward you look down, you shouldn't be able to see any air coming through. So hopefully, have you checked yours? Excellent.
Yeah.
Everybody happy? So we've got some gauntlet gloves now. We did used to use nitrile gloves, but Becky's done it perfectly. So what sometimes happens is people turn their head and the veil pushes up against your face. Obviously they will be able to sting you through the veil. So when you turn your head, be tempted to turn your body as opposed to do that. I've got a massive nose, so my nose goes right against the veil all the while, and I've been stung on the end of it a couple of times, which doesn't help it in terms of not making it massive. So just make sure you turn your whole body when you go around. We'll go in the hive, we'll do a bit of a talk on the bees, we'll have a bit of a question and answer session, and then we'll come back out. And the way that we're going to come back out to make sure we get to here without any bees following us is around the outside of the meadow. And if you could keep your hoods and your gloves on until me or Martin have said, yes, okay, please remove your hoods or gloves. That should be it. Have you got the keys, Martin? Yes. Excellent. Has anybody got any questions? I don't think we have they? No? Excellent. We'll start making our way down then, guys.
Yeah.
The camera lady, do you want to put your bag in my car before I go?
Some hair on my face or something.
I know, that's why
Oh, I'm sorry.
use the hairband. Thank you.
You got your gloves? Yeah.
Has anybody walked by the apron before? Since you've been at Cranfield?
No.
So if you, did you say yeah? Yeah. Did anyone know the bees were here? No? Oh, you did?
No, I didn't. No.
Come on through, guys. Like I say, if you could watch your step as you come in. If everybody could sort of line up against this wall over here for me, that would be great. Is that blowing in everyone's? The smoke's going to go in everybody's face. So morning everyone, welcome. This is the apiary here at Cranfield. We've got 6 hives at the moment. We've also got a couple of swarms that we've collected over in the corner there and some smaller newt boxes. The hives have been in here for 6 or 7 years now. Not 6 or 7 years, sorry, 3 or 4 years. Had them in place. And what you'll notice, the longer that we stay in here, you'll be aware of the activity of the bees. There'll be more and more buzzing. There'll be a lot more investigations. They come out and see what we're doing and how we're going about it. So we keep the hives in what are called nationals. These are national hives. The other type of hives that we use are a poly hive, which is a recycled polystyrene, and then more the traditional sort of hives, which are called the WBCs. You may have seen they've got that sort of classic lift on there. Nationals have really been unchanged for the last sort of 40, 50 years, 70 years, sorry now, in an advent of the Second World War, where they used to have a standardised box wagon, and to move the hives around they standardised the box. Before that there was things hives were all different shapes and different types, and then sort of pre-1800s really, we used to keep them in skeps for a couple of years. Those have been those wicker straw baskets that people see. Not great for keeping bees. Often you would destroy the colony, getting the honey out or moving the bees on. But we've been keeping bees, you know, humans have been keeping bees for centuries and centuries, thousands and tens of thousands of years, back to sort of pre-13,000 BC. You know, there's evidence of cave paintings in Macedonia where man has been manipulating bees and taking honey. Their bee suits were a lot different back then. Obviously, they tended to be leaves and people got stung a lot more. So we've been working with bees alongside honeybees particularly for a long while, and they're very, very clever at what they do. They've not really evolved much in the last couple of million years. They're what's called a superorganism. So a lot of people think there's a queen in here and she's in charge. That's not the case at all. It's a giant democracy. It's generally dominated by females. The male role in bees is pretty rubbish, to be fair. They don't really contribute a lot. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But at this time of year, we're in the height of the season, and the height of what we call the flow and the forage. And a honeybee's life, like most pollinators, is really linked by the monoculture, the flora and the fauna that's around them. So at the moment, we've still got a lot of flowers coming through. There's some yarrow and bindweed we can see here, so they'll be pollinating from that. And then a lot from our, you know, where we've got those meadow areas that you see around. But they're flying a long way to collect the honey. Is this smoke okay for everyone, by the way?
Yeah.
So they'll be flying up to 3 miles around to collect what they need. So at this time of year, with the flow in full force, there'll be about 70,000 bees in each hive. And the hive is made up of a number of components. So we've obviously got a roof, keeps it nice and waterproof. The floor at the bottom here, these are called brood boxes, and you'll notice that they're slightly larger than these boxes above. So the brood boxes, or the nursery chamber, is where the queen lives and she's raising her young. We've then got a queen excluder, which is a wire cage just inside here, and the queen has quite a large bottom, so she can't fit through that excluder. And then above here are what are called supers. So we call these supers because they're superfluous, where they keep the honey that's superfluous to their needs. So they live and work in this hive all year round. They don't hibernate. Some people think all bee species hibernate. Honeybees don't hibernate. This time of year, so it's up to 70,000. As the weather changes and we start to get into the winter, that colony will condense down and reduce in size to around 5,000, and they'll become a small ball in the centre of the brood chamber here. And what they'll do to keep warm is they'll fidget their wings together. So they'll fidget together and rub off each other, a bit like penguins. The ones on the outside that get cold, they'll move on to the inside. The ones that have been on the inside will come out, get something to eat and drink, and then come on to the outside. When it gets really hot, as it's forecast to do sort of next week, is they'll start ventilating the hives. They'll have a series of bees throughout the whole colony that will be pulling in cooler air and pushing out warmer air. So they're maintaining a constant temperature of around 35 degrees all year round. So very clever at what they do and how they do that. What we'll do is we'll just take the lid off this hive here. So you can see a little bit of what's going off inside. I'm going to give them a little puff of smoke. The smoke does a couple of things. It disorientates them from communicating to each other too effectively, and it also triggers an instinct that they think there's a fire. And obviously there's worked really hard to gather all this harvest that's in this colony, so what they'll do is they'll start gorging on honey because they want to try and consume as much of it as possible if they need to leave the nest. And unlike my 5-year-old, when she has an ounce of sugar, she becomes an absolute lunatic. Bees become quite calm when they've eaten a lot of sugar, a bit like a dad on a Sunday dinner run. You know, he's had a meal, a couple of pints, and he's going to have a sleep. So say in here are our supers, and I'm just going to see if I can pull a couple out and see if some of the girls will come out and say hello. It's quite high, so some of the smaller ones can't quite see. So you can see what they've done already is they've packed out and capped off this frame. So this frame would have been put in with just a single wax sheet inside it, and then what they've done is they've drawn out the honey, drawn out the wax, producing the wax by making little platelets that they push out the side of their abdomen. They then force those wax platelets into a shape. It starts as a circle, and then as it hardens, it becomes a honeycomb shape that you know. In these supers, they're just storing pure honey, and you can see underneath there that's just pure runny honey within there. There's one or two that they've not quite capped off. So there's a couple here look, that are still open. And what they're doing is busy gathering up that honey and working away. They're a lot smaller than some people think. We've had a lot of people who don't really see many bees think, oh, I thought these were wasps. You know, they're small black wasps. And what this will do, this will preserve this honey now for, well, they found honey in Egyptian tombs that's 2,000 years old that's still edible. I don't know who actually tried it, but but they're storing it there, so they're capping it off. Otherwise, when it gets really warm, it can become quite runny, as I'm sure you've found out at home, and it can end up dripping through the hive. You can come in here without a suit on, lift the top up, perhaps pull a few frames out, and they'll be quite calm. They're a lot like children or dogs, you know, they have moments where they're just very unpredictable because they're animals. But we'll know there's something wrong because there's no queen giving off a pheromone scent that's telling the colony we're all calm and everything's fine. And you'll also see it because what we'll do when we do our checks, we'll check these colonies once a fortnight approximately. It's the thing that we're always looking for is there a queen? Is she laying? Is the colony happy? Life cycle of a bee is around 6 weeks. It's generally linked to their life as in their distance of flight. So if you're looking at a colony, we lose a queen, we've got about 6 weeks then, sort of 1.5 months of this colony that will have just emerged before we have total colony collapse. So you'll see the numbers go down a lot. You know, if we fully opened up a couple of these hives at this time of year, there's just thousands and thousands of bees everywhere. You know sort of instinctively when there's a challenge. So the workers themselves, so that we can see if I'm around, they're all female. The phrase busy as a bee is very true, particularly for the workers. So the queen lays an egg, and then over a 21-day gestation period, she emerges fully formed. She'll chew through a wax capping. She'll fully form. She'll go and get herself something to eat, which is usually a bit of pollen. The pollen's a highly protein-rich product, and it's one of the sort of essentials they need for their life. Might grow a bit of honey as well if she's really sort of tired, and then she starts work straight away. So she'll be cleaning out the cell that she was hatched from, so the queen can lay another egg in there. She'll start doing things like removing any old bees, dead bees that are in the colony. She'll start moving on to things like wax production. Around day 16, she develops a small gland on the top of her head that allows her to produce those wax platelets. She'll then start ventilating the hive. She might be part of the royal court. She'll work her way to the front of the hive where she'll become a guard bee, and that's what we're talking about those robbing bees earlier. So they've got effectively bouncers on the entrance, and they're monitoring to make sure things aren't coming in that shouldn't be. So mice are a particular problem when we get to the winter. Winnie the Pooh is also a challenge, obviously. Other bees, wasps and hornets. Not so much hornets here, but certainly some of our colonies down the south, we're seeing a bit of European hornet coming in, which is a real challenge for us. And certainly wasps around September. Anyone who's been to a theme park in September or August with the kids will know how much of a pain wasps can be. Although they do provide a very useful function in life, so I can't be too critical of wasps. And what they'll do at that point is they'll then start learning to fly. So if you look at the front, the entrance door here, what you'll notice on the front of some of these hives is you'll notice there's bees sort of dancing around. It's not like Gatwick, they're not waiting for their turn to land in, they're learning how to fly, so they're orientating. And what they'll do is they'll start going further afield, start pushing further and further, and then they'll become a foraging bee. And what they're foraging for is essentials basically to keep this colony alive. So they're looking for water, because every living thing needs water. They're looking for nectar, so that's the flower heads to turn into pollen. They're looking for pollen itself, which is a protein-rich source that they use, and then they're looking for something called propolis, which is tree sap. And the reason you'll notice my gloves are quite brown is that's tree sap. They use it a bit like a silicon sealant, so they waterproof all the hive, they seal up all the gaps and holes, and make sure everything stays nice and tight. So they'll be very efficient at what they do. Who's heard of something called a waggle dance? More and more people have heard of waggle dance. If you're a group of kids, I'll get you waggle dancing now. My wife thinks it's really corny. I think it's awesome. So what people might not realise with the waggle dance is used as an orientation and navigation tool for the other foraging bees. So they're very efficient, so they don't want to mess around. There is a really large crop of lavender over in this corner of the field here. One of these guys will go and find it and to come back to the hive, and to let the other girls in the colony know that there is this huge crop of lavender, she'll waggle dance. So she'll waggle her bum in short circles, then go back round and waggle again. And the angle walking up the frame that she walks, so this sort of angle, would indicate the angle of flight in relation to the sun. So that tells them that 15 degrees northwest. The distance that she walks up the frame indicates the distance of flight and the velocity of the waggle. So she's really 6 pints in at a wedding, like I am. She's really going for it. That indicates the quality of the food source. So quite quickly, all the other bees that are in there watching that and seeing that and picking up on those vibrations, because say it's pitch black dark, don't forget, they'll then start moving to that and they'll come back and they'll waggle dance. So one will go, then 4, 8, 16, 200, 1,000, and they'll quite quickly move from crop to crop within a distance of up to 3 miles to maximise the yield. And that's where they'll be going, you know, if there's something really close, really good, or, you know, particularly when oilseed rape comes out, so, you know, when the fields go all yellow, that's usually a big trigger in beekeeping, because there's an abundance of crop there that's really, really sugar dense, heavy, nectar rich, that they will move on to, and that will trigger the queen start laying. And it's usually around 4 to 6 weeks after that that we start seeing the start of the swarming cycle. So yeah, very, very efficient what they're doing, coming back and doing that. They live around that sort of 6-week period because that's the maximum sort of flight distance they're covering. If they were born in September, the likelihood is they wouldn't be flying much. You know, autumn starts kicking in, the weather starts getting a bit grotty, so they'll be in there looking after the queen, maintaining that 35-degree temperature, and they'll be some of the first bees that emerge in the springtime. And they will go out in the winter when it's wild enough. There is things like ivy and a bit of mahogany that will have some flower on that they can collect. So what they'll do is they'll go out, they'll collect some nectar or pollen, they'll bring it back to the hive, and then they'll process it and work it into the comb, into their food stores. So to generate nectar into honey, they condense it down. So they'll pass it from one bee to the other. They have a honey stomach that they can store it in. So they bring that back and they pass it to each other using a specific enzyme that then reduces it down. It takes about 70% of the water out of it. I always tell children that it's